A former Saudi intelligence official, a top official living in exile in Toronto, has filed an explosive lawsuit against the Saudi crown prince. He alleges that in 2018, the prince sent a group of Saudi hitmen to Toronto to find and kill him, and that it was thwarted at Pearson Airport. These allegations have not been proved in court, but the CBC's Evan Dyer has the details.
Well, this is a story that definitely won't improve the already fractious relationship between Canada and Saudi Arabia. A lawsuit filed in District Court of Washington, D.C. this morning alleges that the Saudi government tried to kill a prominent dissident in Toronto at the same time as Saudi government agents murdered and dismembered Jamal Khashoggi, a Washington Post columnist and Saudi dissident, in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. Essentially, we're talking here about a person, Dr. Saad al-Jabri, a former Saudi intelligence agent who was himself a member of Saudi Arabia's very repressive police state, but who fell out with the current government because of his association with the former crown prince, Mohammed bin Nayef, who was deposed and has now been imprisoned by his younger nephew, Mohammed bin Salman, who has taken control of Saudi Arabia, effectively sidelining the 84-year-old King Salman and running the country with an iron hand, which includes the pursuit of Saudi dissidents around the world and the imprisonment of their family members in Saudi Arabia to try to pressure them to come home. And that also is an element of this case, the case of Dr. Saad al-Jabri, who lives in Toronto, who has some of his adult children with him in Canada, but who has others in Saudi Arabia who have been detained by the Saudi government in what he says is an effort to extort him to go home where he can be killed by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who has been trying to pressure him to leave Canada and return to Saudi Arabia for a couple of years. When those efforts didn't work, according to this lawsuit filed in Washington, D.C., the Saudi government sent a team, a hit squad, very similar to the one that it sent to Turkey to murder Jamal Khashoggi. Those agents, according to the lawsuit, attempted to enter Toronto through Pearson Airport separately on tourist visas, but were detected by Canadian authorities, who figured out that the group were in fact traveling together despite their attempt to pass as separate tourists, and who prevented them from entering the country, with the exception of one of the group who was traveling on a diplomatic passport and therefore had to be allowed to enter. So the allegation here is that there was an attempt to carry out a murder in Toronto of a prominent Saudi dissident, very similar to the murder that shocked the world in Istanbul, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, but that it was foiled by Canadian authorities. But it goes on to allege that Saudi officials have not ceased in their persecution of Dr. Saad al-Jabri, but rather are using his family to try to blackmail him, keeping his children in detention in Saudi Arabia to try to force him to return home. So this is a case that will certainly inflame the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Canada, which was already bad in October 2018. That is, of course, the year that Canada and Saudi Arabia had a major falling out over a tweet sent by Canada's then Foreign Minister, Chrystia Freeland, criticizing Saudi Arabia over another human rights case, the detention of women's rights activist Sama Bradawi. This apparent attempted assassination followed a few months after that. And of course, its revelation in court, with quite a few details in this deposition of over 100 pages, is something that puts the Canadian government on notice. This is something that really requires a response from the government of Canada, an alleged attempted assassination on Canadian soil. We did hear briefly from Foreign Minister François-Philippe Champagne that Canada is going to look into this, but so far no official talk of any retaliation or action against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's certainly another major deterioration in relations between these two countries. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Chelsea, Quebec.
And there is so much more in that lawsuit. Who are these alleged hitmen, also known as the Tiger Squads? What are we supposed to make of the claims in the lawsuit? My next guest says a hit like this seems really odd. Kamran Bokhari is the Director of Analytical Development at the Center for Global Policy. It's a nonprofit think tank based out of Washington. And Kamran is also, of course, a specialist in Middle Eastern politics. Kamran, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Carol.
What do you think of all of this? What do you make of these allegations in this lawsuit?
Well, I mean, look, if you go by the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, this all makes sense. But then the question is, when was this planned? When was this executed? Because in the aftermath of the Khashoggi murder, the Saudis came under a tremendous amount of pressure. And so that's one side of it. If they had planned to do this after that, then it doesn't make sense because they got a lot of backlash for that, and it was very difficult for the kingdom, especially the crown prince and his father, the king, to be able to repair the damage and actually have their Western allies work with them. So that's one part of it. So the timing matters. And secondly, the issue is that this is all very new. Even the murder of Jamal Khashoggi is kind of like the Saudi intelligence service, developing a new capability of hitmen and hit squads. This isn't their standard and traditional MO of going after dissidents. Now, of course, this isn't just any dissident. He's a former intelligence czar who, is no longer, with the regime. He's become a defector of sorts.
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess it depends on how much one believes the credibility of the word of the current crown prince. I mean, last year, the New York Times did a big takeout reporting about a secret camp authorized by the crown prince to silence dissenters, including surveillance, kidnapping, detention, torture of Saudi citizens at home and abroad. And this was based on interviews with American officials familiar with classified intelligence. I mean, if you take out that part of the accusation of what was happening in Canada and you look at various other things, the accusation about, the crown prince trying to get him through Interpol, and Interpol saying, no, this is a political situation, so we're taking his name off the international list. And you look at the reporting on the New York Times, and you look at some of the other accusations, including the disappearance of his two children. I mean, is there more to this that's credible than not?
Well, as far as the children and their detention within the kingdom is concerned, that's sovereign territory, and there's not a whole lot that anybody can do about it. And that is the problem. Mr. Jabari is trying to get his children back like any other father. And that is the issue at present right now. His kids are in detention, and there's not a whole lot the world can do about it. I'm referring to the Saudis trying to act in a very hostile manner in a country like Canada. This isn't the United States. U.S. and Saudi relations are special. They've been historic, and the United States tends to look the other way on a lot of occasions when it involves, Saudis getting involved. And so, although that mood has changed over the years, especially in the wake of the Air Force officer who killed 3 people at a naval air station in Florida not too long ago. But for the Saudis to go into Canada and try to kill Mr. Jabari or a dissident, that's a whole new level of risk for the regime.
It
so
is.
The question
yeah.
is.
Go ahead.
So the question is that, when were they trying to do this? It's not really clear. The report suggests 2018. If it was right around the time that they eliminated Jamal Khashoggi, one could say, yeah, this is part of an elaborate plan to go after dissidents. But I think since then, these kind of activities are very, very risky for the Saudis.
Yeah, I don't have a date on this, but The Guardian did a story in June, and it was again repeated in the Toronto Star today, and that's where I picked it up, of another Saudi dissident living in Canada, Omar Abdulaziz. He had been warned by the RCMP that there was a credible target, that he could be a target of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I mean, look, everything depends upon the reliability of the intelligence. So if RCMP alerted this particular Saudi individual, then you have to take this seriously, because the RCMP isn't going to just go and act on the basis of rumors. There has to be the assessment of that intelligence on the part of the RCMP and other parts of public safety. That assessment was made based on some evidence that was deemed credible. So yes, There's also the aspect that we need to distinguish is an actual plot versus the Saudis telegraphing to their the target of these alleged or planned plots to kill people in order to scare them, in order to shake them down, in order to get what they want without actually having to go through the killing. So there's nuance here that really needs to be picked apart.
Yeah, I wonder what would happen if Saad al-Jabri did go back to Saudi Arabia. I'm assuming most people would not recommend that.
No, not at all. I mean, this is an individual who worked for the former Crown Prince Mohammed bin Naif, whom the current Crown Prince basically, unseated. And recently, that former Crown Prince was taken into custody on the charges of some alleged, plans to overthrow, the current Crown Prince and his father and other, what they deem as quote unquote anti-state activities. So you're talking about a very high-profile individual who was in a very influential and senior intelligence position when he used to work for the kingdom, and he has a lot of information that could very likely embarrass the current Crown Prince and the Saudi state. So
what is that information? Do you know?
Incentive.
Do you know what that information might be, Kamran?
Well, look, I mean, I don't know for a fact what it is, but it could be charges of corruption. It could be things that the Saudis just don't want the world to find out that they've been engaged in, that could hurt their reputation, that could alienate them from their Western partners. And I mean, Saudi Arabia is, one of the largest producers of crude in the world. It could hurt business. I mean, there's a lot that can go on. And of course, once that comes in, there's the feedback loop back into domestic politics in the kingdom. And the kingdom is going through a difficult transition right now. So the last thing the Saudis want is one of their own to come out and air their dirty laundry, whatever that may be. And so that is the fear. And that is why I think I personally, and while I'm not convinced that the Saudis would create another blunder after the Khashoggi murder, but they definitely are not taking this lightly. They do want Mr. Jabari back, and that is why they're using his children as pawns.
Kamran Bokhari is the Director of Analytical Development at the Center for Global Policy. Kamran, thank you once again.
My pleasure, Carol.